Emily and I am a lecturer in psychology. And for those of you, hi fan club. For those of you who don't work in academia, there are two types of lecturers. There are research-focused lecturers and there are teaching-focused lecturers. And there is a little bit of a prestige difference between the two. One of them publishes in prestigious journals and gets to travel to conferences in exotic locales. The other publishes on Twitter and gets to travel to the annual Higher Education Academy conference, which as a punishment is always held in Birmingham. If you hadn't guessed by how I'm dressed, I'm the shit one. That's a lie. Obviously, by the way that I'm dressed, you guessed that I'm a lesbian and a cat owner. No, but seriously, lots of people look down on teaching, and those people can fuck the fuck off. Because I do not get it. I absolutely fucking love my job. It's interesting, it's rewarding, and is anyone who's ever been to a lecture whilst the tweed suit read word for word of a PowerPoint with all the enthusiasm of a panda in heat? It takes a real skill to do it well. But more than that, it's the power. You know that thing where if you say, I don't believe in fairies, then a fairy will drop down dead? Fucking child's play. Every time I set an essay deadline, I take out 3 grandparents. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you all this is because I'm going to talk about educational research tonight. So there was a paper came out a few years ago, and it said that in a lecture you're better taking notes by hand rather than on a laptop. And the theory is that because you can type faster than you can write, you tend to just type down word for word what the lecturer is saying rather than summarising as you go. One of the many problems with this paper is that they got their participants to watch 7-minute and 15-minute TED Talks rather than full-length lectures. Now, I remember from my undergraduate days, I would turn up to most lectures and, I would be ready to learn. And I'd get all of my stuff out, I'd have my printed slides and my multiple coloured pens, and everything would be arranged on the desk in right angles because of that low-level academic anxiety that every single fucker in this room is familiar with. And I'd be properly on the case until about 20 minutes in, when I'm staring off into space and doodling abstract shapes that in retrospect were probably vulvas. I can believe you might take notes verbatim. 15 minutes for an hour, I am less sure. That academic anxiety thing is weird though, isn't it? My take on it is that in order to be successful in academia, you have to be creative and inquisitive, but also really good at following the rules. And it creates this kind of conflict. Like, I like to pretend that I'm a bit of a bad girl, a bit of a rebel, stand-up comedy, bit of an edge. But when it comes to doing what I'm told at work, I am so straight-laced they're going to take away my fucking gay card. When I was about 5 years old, the BBC came to my first school. And they were doing this feel-good news story piece on the fact that we'd just got a shiny new school building. It was 1990, indoor toilets had made it to Newcastle. It was an exciting time for everyone. And I vividly remember our teacher, Mrs. Rowell, saying to us that we must behave. When the cameras were there, we needed to just sit still and not get up and not make a fuss and not put our hand up. We must be quiet and behave and just do our colouring. If you look at that footage, at first glance, what you'll see is a small child who is concentrating very intently on doing her colouring in. Really trying to stay within those lines. If you look at the footage a little more carefully though, you'll realise that what you're actually looking at is a small child who was so rule-bound, who was so anxious about doing what she's been told, that rather than get up, rather than make a fuss, rather than put up her hand and ask her beloved Mrs. Rowell if she can go to the toilet. Instead, that small child has chosen to shit herself on live television. Now, I'd be embarrassed by by that story, but whenever anyone asks me what it's like to work in academia, I can't help but think of the day I continue to work despite sitting in my own filth. So yes, back to the present day. Aside from working on my fecal assertiveness, my main line of research is now lecture capture. Now, I said this to someone the other day, and they thought I said lecturer capture. And I was like, yeah, sure, I've currently got Professor Biggins in a cage. I'm trying to pinpoint how long he can talk about his latest theory before he disappears up his own arse. It's 4.5 minutes, but it feels like a lifetime. So yeah, lecture capture is wank speak for the act of recording your lectures so that they can be viewed online at a later date. And it is a seriously controversial topic in academia. Lots of people get very angry and refuse to do it. So to finish off, I thought I would tell you my top 3 reasons I have been given for why people refuse to record their lectures. Number 1. Well, we didn't have it in my day, and I turned out just fine. This one genuinely makes me really nervous, because here's the thing. If we're going to start getting rid of things because they didn't exist in 1970s academia, then fat little lesbians from the northeast of England are not going to survive that fucking cold. Number 2, performance management. Or in other words, your big bad boss is going to use the recording as evidence of whether you're any good at teaching. And there's a lot to unpack with this one. I used to work in Wetherspoons as a microwave chef. I can make a bitchin' cottage pie in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. To set the scene, the manager of the pub I used to work in wore a clip-on tie because the customers tried to strangle him so often. We had to coat the top of the toilets with Vaseline, which was supposed to stop people doing lines of coke off them. But it just led to a new dessert option, jelly surprise. And the reason I quit, very seriously, the reason I quit that job was because one of my colleagues, not a customer, one of my colleagues threatened to kill me on our Christmas staff night out because we'd lost his bingo pen. But now, thanks to universities having an underprivileged postcode quota to fill, here I am. A lecturer at an ancient Russell Group university, earning far more than I should given my contribution to society and getting to do this stuff for work. The point I'm trying to make is that academia is the only profession whereby the idea that your employer would use proof that you're really bad at your job to tell you that you're really bad at your job is seen as a complete and utter violation of your human rights. But more importantly, I've met senior management. They don't have time to watch your lecture recordings. Have you got any idea how long it takes to play a game of golf? And last, but certainly not least, if we start recording our lectures, eventually they will just replace real lecturers with recordings. Now, I'm not going to argue with this one. All I'm going to say is that as every woman who has a spare pack of batteries next to her bed knows, if you can be replaced by a robot, you should.